We're living in this age of just incredible scientific power. We can literally rewrite the code of life, we can reshape our world. But with all that power comes even bigger questions, decisions that have consequences that could last for generations. So how do we even begin to decide what's right when the stakes are that high? Let's take a look at some of the toughest questions we're facing right now.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Should we be making genetic copies of living things? This isn't some far-off sci-fi idea anymore.
The second Dolly the sheep was born, that abstract question became a living, breathing reality. Suddenly, her existence just forced us to deal with this whole new category of ethical problems we had never even considered before.
Or hey, what about this one? If a scientist discovers a gene that's linked to a disease, can they own it? I mean, can a piece of our actual human blueprint belong to a person or to a corporation?
And this really gets to the heart of it, right? Our technical skill is just off the charts. We have the power to manipulate life at its most fundamental level. The real challenge isn't just can we do these things, it's should we.
So, to try and navigate these super complex questions, a whole new field of study popped up. It's designed to be a kind of bridge between what we can do with science and what we value as humans. Let's dive into the world of bioethics.
So yeah, bioethics. That's the formal name for the field that wrestles with these huge questions. And the name itself, which was coined way back in 1971 by Van R. Potter, it really says it all. It's about building a bridge to the future by thinking ethically about the life sciences.
Okay, so to guide these debates, bioethicists lean on a framework of four main principles. First up, you've got beneficence, which is basically just, do good, actively promote well-being. That's balanced by non-maleficence, the famous do no harm rule. Third is autonomy, which is all about respecting a person's right to choose for themselves, for their own body and health. And finally, there's justice, which forces us to ask if the good stuff and the bad stuff from a new technology are being spread out fairly in society. These four ideas are pretty much the foundation for any bioethical discussion.
Okay, so we've got the ethical framework. But what about actually making the call? How do you structure your thinking? Well, it turns out there's a whole toolkit for that. A bunch of systems designed to bring some logic and clarity when things get tough.
So the first thing you got to get is that there are two ways to look at any decision. You've got normative theory. That's the ideal world, right? It's how a perfectly logical, rational person should choose. But then there's descriptive theory, and that's about the real world. It's how we actually make choices, with all of our human biases, our gut feelings, and our shortcuts. And the gap between those two, that's where things get really interesting. So to get rational about it, you can use something like a decision matrix. Seriously, just think of it like a map of all the possible futures. On one side, you list out all your choices, your strategies. On the other side, you put all the stuff you can't control. The states of nature. And where those two lines meet, bam, that's every single possible outcome you need to think about. It's all about making the invisible visible.
So once you've mapped out every possible future, the next step is, well, which one do you want? And that means we have to go from just listing stuff to actually calculating and comparing it all.
And that brings us to this really powerful process called decision analysis. You can think of it like a calculator for consequences. It's a formal, step-by-step way to think through really complex problems, especially when you have no idea what's going to happen.
And really, you can boil that whole complicated-looking process down to three key steps. First, you structure the problem. Figure out your actions, what could happen. Second, you describe all the uncertainties, maybe you assign some probabilities, and you get really clear on what you actually want, what you value. And then finally, with all that laid out, you can systematically search for the best possible decision.
Okay, another really cool tool is the fault tree. Think of it like a logic puzzle for figuring out what could go wrong. You start at the end with a potential failure, like this tank overflowing, and you work your way backwards step by step to identify every single thing that could have possibly led to that failure. So when you're thinking about something huge, like a brand new gene therapy, a tool like this is absolutely crucial for mapping out all the potential risks.
All right, so we've got these amazing logical tools. We should be making perfect decisions all the time, right? Well, here's the twist. There's one big variable we haven't really talked about yet. Us, the wonderfully complex and, let's be honest, often irrational human mind.
And this right here shows a really deep insight from what's called the behavioral theory of the firm. It shows that how much risk we're willing to take isn't a fixed thing.
When a company is doing great, hitting its goals, it tends to play it safe. But when it's falling behind, it's way more likely to take a huge gamble to try and catch up. Our decisions are shaped by our situation, not just by pure logic.
And that brings us to another huge idea. In the real world, we almost never search for the absolute perfect optimized solution. Instead, we do something called satisfy. It's a mashup of satisfy and suffice. Basically, we look for a solution that's just good enough to get the job done, and then we move on.
But maybe the most powerful psychological glitch of all is summed up perfectly right here, in the core idea of prospect theory. The pain of losing $100 feels way, way worse than the joy of finding $100. This is called loss aversion, and it means we are basically hardwired to be more scared of the downside than we are excited by the upside. And that dramatically warps how we make decisions.
So where does all this leave us? We've got these rational frameworks on one side, and then the messy reality of human psychology on the other. The trick to making the final call is putting them both together.
Yeah, it turns out there's this massive gap between what we feel is risky and what the actual facts say. I mean, look at how much we worry about some things compared to their actual statistical danger. For instance, the risk from something as boring as indoor radon is way, way higher than a lot of the things that grab all the headlines. Our gut feeling about risk is often totally out of whack with reality.
And really, that's the main takeaway from all of this. The best decision makers don't just lean on logic. They use rational tools, sure, like decision matrices and fault trees, but they use them with a deep understanding of their own biases, their own psychology, their own human weaknesses.
So at the end of the day, we have the tools. We can map the choices, we can calculate the risks, we can even start to understand our own biases. But here's the thing. Those tools can only tell us the best way to get where we want to go. They can't tell us where we should want to go in the first place. So the ultimate question isn't really about logic. It's about what we, as people and as a society, truly value. And that, well, that's a decision no flowchart can ever make for us.